And so I'm moving up on our agenda the quick look. Last month, we kind of introduced the idea of a few things that we want to try to do in these meetups. One is to let people talk about their own flows, and hopefully we'll do some of that on an ongoing basis. Whether or not, that can be just verbal. I know there's some concern about people showing a flow that might reveal customer data. So I think it would be okay to talk about it verbally without actually sharing your screen if you wanted to. And then another thing I think that would be beneficial, at least I know for me, is to talk about the different connectors that are available and what you can do with them. And I thought taking a look at a connector a month, something like that, and exploring what they're capable of would be a good use of these meetings. And also a way of showing how to use Connect for beginners a little bit. So I was going to show a little bit of work I did with the Calendly connector. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Does anybody use Calendly? I know Zoom is a questionable medium for asking group-wide questions like that. But I know.
Thumbs up, yes.
Okay, good. A few people do.
Yeah, I do too.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't started using it. I've occasionally thought about using it myself, and I've always been a little bit hesitant to be that organized, force myself to be that organized. But it's sure an interesting tool, and it integrates pretty easily in the little bit of work I did with it. And like I said, I'm going to use this as a way of showing what I did from a sort of a beginner's perspective, so somebody newer to Connect can see how Connect works. I'm going to switch to sharing my whole screen instead of just the presentation there. I'm logged into Claris Connect in one tab of my browser here. I'm logged into my Calendly account here in another tab in my browser, and I have a FileMaker database open. The FileMaker database is just the meetings template. So I had just gone up here a little while back, done create new, and created a meetings database from this template here. The template defaults to not having a password, so I had to give myself a password in there and throw it on FileMaker server in order to use it with Claris Connect. And one of the first things I had to do was I think probably everybody who's used Connect has forgotten to do this perhaps. I had to go in and change the permissions here. I had to enable the FM-REST extended privilege set for my user that I'm going to log into this database from Connect with. Otherwise Connect is going to throw an error. So I've got the kind of the three components I need: Connect, Calendly, and FileMaker. And just to make things a tiny bit more interesting, I threw an extra step into my flow to post a message to Slack. We were talking there for a second about the use case for Claris Connect versus working directly with the API, and to me this seems like one of them where if you're where you have a legitimate need to connect to multiple APIs at the same time, that seems like an area where Claris Connect might be more useful than a direct API connection. This Slack connection just takes so little effort. With Claris Connect, it's pretty slick. So I'm just going to review the flow I put together, and I might go ahead and talk in the context of this about another issue that I came up with in Connect recently that I'd be curious people's opinions about, which is going to make my demonstration here last a little longer. But I'll talk about that as I get down to the FileMaker connection. So my triggering event here with Calendly is the event creation in Calendly. So what I told FileMaker is that I wanted, or what I told Connect was that I wanted the triggering event to be the creation of a 60-minute meeting. So my first step in my flow here is just that. I connected to my Calendly account and told it that my event type is a 60-minute trigger. Now I can go back out of here and look at connected apps and look at my Calendly account here. This is what I had to set up in order to get my Calendly connection to work. And to do that, I had to look up my API key in Calendly, which is pretty straightforward. I think this is an area, the difficulty of getting that API key is one of the things in my limited experience that makes working with Connect either a little harder or a little bit easier. In Calendly, it was quite easy. All I had to do was poke around at the different menus here until I found the section where my API key was, which I think it was right there. Yeah, so there's my API key. I just click the copy key button, and I'm good to go. I just pasted that into my connector in my flow, and all of a sudden my Connect flow is connecting to my Calendly account. We were doing another bit of work last week, looking at perhaps using the Mailgun connector with Connect to address one of our, well, Brad, I don't know if you're still on the line. Brad was talking about an idea of using the Mailgun connector with FileMaker to create a flow to send emails so that you could have, so you could send email. We all probably send emails from our FileMaker solutions for different reasons. And
yeah, I'm still here, Joe.
Oh, okay, great. That often necessitates embedding SMTP credentials in the send mail script step, which is okay sometimes, and other times perhaps you prefer not to. And we were talking about using Connect as a way of sending an email without having to embed SMTP credentials in the solution. And I mention that because working with Mailgun and tracking down the API keys was trickier than Calendly, and I haven't gotten back to working on it. But integrating with Mailgun is going to be a little bit trickier because of that, the API keys not being as obvious where they are. So the creation of the event in Calendly is the triggering event for Claris Connect, and the first action that's being taken is posting of a message to a Slack channel. And then the second action being taken is the creation of a record in FileMaker. So my 4 steps here of defining my FileMaker server connection, I'm just going to go through those and show how you connect this flow to your FileMaker server. I have some connected apps already listed at the top here, and I'm going to choose FileMaker server. And my action that I want to take is to create a record, so I'm leaving that selected. And I already have a connection to a server defined here, but I'm going to create a new one instead, just to show how this is done. It's pretty easy. This is the host name of my server. This is the username and password for the account that I created, and this account has to have the FMRest privilege set enabled. And then this is the name of my database. And so now I'm connected to that server. As we've been using Claris Connect, one of the things that we've encountered or decided is that it's pretty critical that you change this fairly quickly. Perhaps someone is aware of a way to edit these connection settings that I haven't run into yet, but as far as I have seen, there's no way to edit these settings. You can edit the name, but you can't edit the actual settings. So if you're working with multiple different FileMaker server connections, you can lose track of which database on which server your connectors are connecting to. Has anybody run into any better ways of dealing with that than just renaming this connection? Nope. So now I've got my create record action defined up here, which server I'm connecting to. And then down below here, Claris Connect is telling me some information about where the information is going into and where it's coming from. So I've defined which layout that I want Claris Connect to reference when it's pushing the data into FileMaker. And then with these plus buttons over here, I've selected the data from Calendly that I want to go into those fields. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. The data coming in from Calendly is a JSON object, and Calendly is pushing over quite a bit of data, some of which isn't populated. I'm just grabbing the data based on this information that I see right here, so it's fairly easy to tell. And I only, for simplicity's sake, I only tried to populate 3 fields in FileMaker: the start time, the note, and the title. So these are all analogous to the fields that you see over here: start time, note right here, and title. And I'm going to save my flow. And I'll switch over to my Calendly account. This is the URL that I would be providing to people who I wanted to schedule appointments with me. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to pretend to be somebody else. I'm going to tell Calendly that I want to schedule a 60-minute appointment with John Newhoff on the 23rd at 3 p.m. And I'm pretending, if it's not super clear, I'm pretending to be Barney. So this Calendly account is linked to my my Gmail account. So now that Barney Rubble appointment at 3 p.m. on the 23rd is showing up on my Gmail account. If I go over and look at Slack, I see that I got an announcement that a new appointment was scheduled by a Calendly for John. And if I go into FileMaker, I can see that, I don't know if anybody noticed before, but this said 1 of 1 before. Now I've got 2 records in here, and my Barney Rubble appointment has shown up in FileMaker. So if you're using, FileMaker 19, which this is, with the new calendar add-in, to have a solution that was integrating calendar data, this could be a cool way to integrate Calendly's capabilities with your FileMaker solution with its calendar data. I blew through that pretty quick, so anybody who's fairly new to Connect, if there's any parts of that I can clarify or talk about further, or if anybody has any comments on that, I'd love to hear about it. One thing, this might be a good segue into talking about a problem I ran into with Connect. And I imagine everybody here who's used Connect for more than a trivial bit of work has run into this. I was playing around with that mailgun idea. I had created a new, I had gone into our PBS internal project here, and I had created a new flow, FMP to mailgun here. And you can see this solution has some other flows in it for integrating with FileMaker. There's one that just lets you send a message to Slack from FileMaker, one that sends an email address into MailChimp and posts it to FileMaker, and then some webhook related flows that we're using to do task numbering in our Teamwork project management system. But I started running into an issue with Connect that surprised me. And and that is that this URL stays quite static as you're working with multiple FileMaker connections in a flow. And I imagine, just out of curiosity, not everybody's got their camera on, but if this has caused you a problem already, shout or raise your hand or something. I'm just curious how many people have run into the problem of this URL not being very unique. Anybody? At all? No?
No, not yet.
Not yet. So it's an interesting problem, and I don't know if we still have anybody from Claris still in the meetup, but I'd be curious if they have any input on this. If you have going on what we have going on here in this PBS internal project, where we have 4 flows that are working with FileMaker. FileMaker is the triggering event in each of these. So in theory, this FileMaker to Mailgun flow would be triggered by a script in FileMaker. So probably a send mail script that you called from other scripts where you said, okay, I want to send an email to somebody. I'm going to pass an email address to this Claris Connect trigger, and it's going to call this flow, and it's going to have Mailgun send an email. Likewise, this MailChimp one is probably triggered by a script in FileMaker that you pass an email address to, and it triggers the flow to push the email address into MailChimp. But if you look at this Mailgun flow, the URL that FileMaker is calling to call out to connect and actuate the flow is this one here ending in M1QU. And if I go look at the MailChimp one, the URL is the same URL. And so Claris Connect doesn't have any way to know which of these 2 flows is calling it. And you might ask yourself, well, what happens then? And the interesting thing is, I would have perhaps thought it would have executed the first flow that it hit that had that URL, but it doesn't. It executes them all. So if I call all 4 of these flows are triggered from FileMaker, and if I call a script in FileMaker from any one of them, all 4 of those flows will execute.